If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today, I'm joined by Duey Freeman, a world-renowned therapist, educator, and equine professional with over 80,000 client hours and decades of experience in human development and performance psychology. In this episode, we explore why so many high performers struggle with burnout, identity loss, and the endless pursuit of validation. Duey unpacks the hidden emotional drivers behind performance pressure and how healing them leads to greater clarity, connection, and sustainable success. If you've ever felt like achievement isn't enough, or you're chasing something that never quite satisfies, this episode's for you. Let's get started. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Duey Freeman to the show. Duey is a therapist with decades of experience, and we're just so honored to have him be a part of the show. So, Duey, welcome.
Thank you so very much. I cannot tell you how much I'm looking forward to this, and also the man who introduced the two of us, Mark Sylvester, is just one of the most wonderful people in the world. So, even without knowing you, I feel like I know you through Mark. And that makes it extra exciting. So thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. You know, I spend a couple of mornings a week with Mark through training and working together. And he's talked about you every session since we started.
Really?
So, yeah, oh, yeah. So this has been in the works for a while. I can't wait to really dive in.
So we know each other well at this point. Is that?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Beautiful.
Practically related at this point.
Exactly.
So, Duey, we're going to talk about the nervous system, and we're going to talk about that as it pertains to our relationships and in particular high performers.
Okay.
How does the nervous system guide our behaviors? And as we start thinking about attachment styles and we start thinking about how we are shaped as it relates to our relationship with ourselves and then to those around us.
Why don't I start with a bit of an overview and sort of start there? Maybe we can build a bit of a foundation and then build on that throughout our conversation. Yeah. And I'll start with sort of a why and how I got into this. When I was born, 1950, my mother had tuberculosis. She was diagnosed with tuberculosis about 5 or 6 months into her pregnancy with me. And if you can think back that far, the treatment for tuberculosis was pretty much nothing. Mm-hmm. The antibiotics for it weren't there, and et cetera, et cetera. So when I was born, I was split from my mother. She went into a sanitarium, and thankfully she was able to recover. But we were not reunited fully until I was 18 months old.
Oh.
Which left me not having that original attachment with my mother. Mm-hmm. I never really looked at that throughout my childhood. I was with my father and my grandparents. I had an older sister. So I had some really good people there. And when I think back on how difficult that might have been for them, I can only praise them for the job that they did. Mm-hmm. But what that led me to was, and before we started recording, we talked a bit about some unconscious stuff or certainly subconscious stuff. I did quite well in school, and I did not know how to have relationships. I would start relationships, both friendships, but also later, in my teens, like having girlfriends and women friends as I grew older, but I never could really put that together. What I did essentially early on was attached to school and attached to achieving in school, as well as some sports stuff. I did pretty well in a few sports. But then when school was done, it was like, now what? And I would enter into relationships and mess them up and all kinds of stuff. I also ended up, interestingly enough, right after I graduated with my first degrees, which were, interestingly enough, mechanical engineering and physics, I ended up on the Kent State campus in May of 1970, and I was on that campus during the shootings where the National Guard shot students. And that basically blew my life up. And a friend of mine said, let's go work at this camp that was doing Outward Bound. It was early on in the Outward Bound movement. And that was really the beginning of me ending up 55 years later. Is that something like that? Maybe however it is from 1970 till now. That began my process of looking at myself, trying to figure out what was going on with myself. And I ended up being fortunate enough to run into some very good therapists, but also a man named Foster Klein, who worked with early attachment stuff. And as soon as I started working with him, and he was a supervisor, he was a clinical supervisor for me, not a therapist. But it was like he was working with early attachment stuff, and I was going between him and actually dating a woman who had been adopted early in her life. I was going, I wasn't adopted, but what's going on for me is exactly the same thing as this woman who was. And then in talking to Foster and working with him and all the attachment stuff, I was going, oh my God, I did not have that early attachment. So I started doing my own work around that and literally spent years doing that. And I'd also gone back to school, got another bachelor's degree, then a double master's. So, and I started putting together something for myself that later on I ended up teaching and around attachment and attachment work. So let me talk about just generally about attachment.
Yeah.
What's out there now, and it's actually more prominent than it ever has been, is John Bowlby. It's originally his work, and then Mary Ainsworth. They actually published a book in 1958 with the different attachment styles, and they started with avoidant and anxious attachment. So the avoidant was down-regulating energy. The anxious is up-regulating energy, and those were the original terms. It wasn't avoidant or
Can you explain that for me? What do you mean by down-regulating and up-regulating energy?
So if a baby was down-regulating energy, there'd be a tendency to be lethargic, not making very good contact with parents, sort of being alone, avoiding contact, avoiding relationship. With the upregulating would be more sort of the hyperactive kid who would actually avoid contact by moving around and being almost too active. So this will come in a little bit. The concept of contact, which is a piece that I work with a lot. And Contact, the definition that we have put together around contact, is a present attuned moment where our energetic, emotional, physical, and or spiritual boundaries touch another. That's our definition of contact. What's really interesting about that, and I'll do a little bit of a leap ahead and then come back, is in high performance, whether it be high performance in some area of work or professional process, or high performance physically and with sports, if we don't have contact, particularly with ourselves or with others, we can't perform. We can't do that very well. So basically what Bowlby and Ainsworth put together were a process of talking about avoidance or anxiety or something in between where you're just confused, which is a disorganized attachment they speak about. And but when I look at those and in my work, and I have about 80,000 contact hours as a therapist, I've never seen anybody have just one of those.
Yeah.
Nobody is just avoidant. Nobody's just anxious. Nobody's just organized. We go all over the place. So I've started using the term fragmented attachment as opposed to integrated attachment. And part of the reason I use that is because attachment is an ongoing process. So it's not just attachment, it's actually attaching. So in the work that I do, I talk about attaching versus attachment because attaching is a verb and attachment's a noun. And we as beings are verbs. We're always moving. There's always energy moving. And we're not stagnant. We're never stagnant. So let me talk sort of briefly about a model that I put together that makes sense to me around how we attach and that process.
And Duey, before you jump into that, what age group are we talking about here when this is happening? Is this from birth to, is this ongoing throughout adulthood, or does this stop at a certain point? Are there key markers in time when this process is starting?
Perfect question. The answer is yes.
Good.
One of the things that people don't really look at around attachment and the attachment process is the attachment process goes on until the day we die. However, what I'm going to speak to right now is the attachment process that actually begins in utero and goes through about the first 18 months of our lives.
Right.
So that's the foundational time. Then 24 to 27 months of time. And with much of the new research that's out there, and this is like mind-blowingly interesting to me, is that in utero, we're actually beginning to attach. We attach energetically in our mother's wombs, but we're also attaching right brain to right brain energetically. And I'll give you some examples of that and how that works in real life now in a little bit. But in utero, there's three things that we're always getting. We're always getting food through our mother's umbilical cord. We're always getting touched, which is where all the contact stuff comes in. And we're always getting moved. When mom is walking, she's breathing. Even when she's sleeping, she's breathing. Or rolling over, or she's moving in one way or another. So we're always getting those three. Once we are born, we need those three things still.
Right.
We need food, which food on a continuum is also nurturing. So, and sometimes we can have food and it's not nurturing. Sometimes we don't need to have food and we get nurtured incredibly nicely by our partners, by our friends, by those kinds of relationships. We also need touch, which is, even a little bit before when you and your wife were chatting and introducing yourselves, she touched you. And so touch is also contact. So contact is that energetic touch of where our emotional, physical, energetic, or spiritual boundaries touch another. It can be all of those, or it can be one of those. So we need that. And we also need movement. When people get themselves anxious, and particularly when we're high performance sports, how many high performance sports are sitting? None that I know of. Like LeBron James does not sit very often.
That is correct.
For instance, or some of the higher level tennis players, or the higher level skiers or runners, or, I mean, there's a lot of movement.
Mm-hmm.
So we want and need those things. So we're always asking for food. We're always asking for touch. We're always asking for movement. When a baby does that, from the time they're born until about 18-ish months old, and this is when things go well, it's called bidding. They bid for food, touch, and movement by crying, by wiggling, by being cute, by slobbering, by cooing, by pooing their pants, and all of those kind of things. When that happens, when a baby is bidding, and our parents and caregivers are there for us, they pick us up, they rock us, they check our diapers, and they feed us. When that happens well, they're providing food with contact. They're changing our diapers with contact. They're rocking us with contact. They're attending to our needs with contact. So when that happens, we end up going, oh, this is a pretty good deal for us. And then it's sort of a cycle. So there's food, touch, and movement. Then we can go down to bidding, then providing food, touch, and movement, and contact and relationship. And then we come out of that and go, oh, the world must be an okay place to be. And then we start that cycle all over. We do that cycle hundreds of times a day as infants. So the core essence of attachment is being able to go through that cycle and come out okay. So the core essence of attachment is being able to go through a hard time and come out okay in contact and relationship. Does that make sense to this point?
I'm recognizing some patterns in my life. Yes.
Exactly. Now, there's a couple things in here to throw in, which will actually really, I think, connect into high performance, is that if we get food, touch, and movement provided to us, but it's not in contact or in relationship, instead of attaching to the person that provides the food, touch, and movement, we attach to the food, touch, and movement itself.
And would that relate to also attaching to the achievement?
Yes.
That comes from our efforts as high performers?
Yes. I've worked with very high level people, and like mountaineers, runners, because I only live like 45 minutes from Boulder. So,
right.
You know, the runners and triathletes, and I worked with a lot of people on those levels, swimmers, tennis players, to where the attachment is to the tennis. The attachment is to the running. The attachment is to the working out. The attachment, instead of the attachment being to other people or to ourselves, and having the working out be a part of our lives, not the only thing that we attach to.
Yeah, and Dewey, how much of that attaching to the achievement, whatever that might look like, would come from the lack of that security, or the lack of an internal worth or an internal connection to yourself? And I'll tell you where I'm going with that. The way I feel like it shaped my life is having this sense of never good enough.
Exactly.
And constantly pursuing external validation. If I achieve this, I'll be happy. I'll be enough. And you never get there. Then it's if I achieve this. And then it's the
Right.
next thing and the next thing. And at some point, I recognized, oh, hang on, I'm still chasing stuff, and there's still something missing every time.
Well, exactly. So part of what is happening in that is we're not separating personhood and behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have true attachment, we can separate personhood and behavior. And what I mean
Can
by
you
that
talk to those for me? Yeah. Okay, go
is,
on.
what I mean by that is when we're little beings, 7 or 8 months old, and we're sitting in our little high chairs and we knock our oatmeal. Well, seven's a little early to be having oatmeal, 7 months, but we knock something from our high chair onto the floor. If we get the message of bad boy or bad girl, don't do that, then that's combining personhood and behavior.
Mm.
If we get the message of, sweetie, I love you, and it's not okay to throw your oatmeal on the floor, then we have the love and our okayness connected to who we are as beings. And our behavior over here is about either not throwing oatmeal or doing a really good job at something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So when those two things are not connected, we can be very high achievers. And the wording I use, and you may have heard these words before, is we become human beings instead of human doers.
Interesting.
So it's like in my 20s, I was a pretty high level Nordic ski racer. Not high enough to go to the Olympics or anything like that, but I could win some local events.
Mm-hmm.
And I would ski in the same races as, like, I don't know if you know who Bill Koch is, but he was the first Nordic skier who from the U.S. that got a medal. I could ski in the same races as him, but I wasn't good enough to stay with him.
Right.
I could about the first 2/3 of the race, and it was like, see you later.
Yeah.
But part of what happens there's two things that I see happen with attachment and really, really high level performance. One is we get attached to the performance. Mm-hmm. The other is that many times our coaches become our attachment figures, which, is, you probably know, in really high level performance, sometimes coaches can be great and supportive, and sometimes they can be relatively abusive.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely worked for both of those coaches.
Right. And so, and that's even happens in the horse world where, I'll be at a clinic as a student and I might, the clinician may be very, very good and horribly abusive, and by abusive, what I mean is that they're not separating personhood and behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw that a lot in high performance sport. Over and over, it was, he's a bad guy. It was framed as the person, and they were labeled as a package with their bad performance or with the actions that they were performing that were out of line, maybe with the culture.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
I saw was huge amounts of insecurity in these professional athletes. That because I think that was the connection that had been made throughout, and they knew their worth was reliant on their performance.
Yeah, exactly. And if we have our worth connected to our performance, when we don't do well or when we retire, because the truth is the really high level performance people, 28's old.
Yeah.
If you're 30 and you're in the Olympics, that's even older.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, if our worth is dependent on the gold medals that we've won or any medals that we've won,
Yeah.
then when we're not winning medals anymore, then, like, who are we?
No, I see that. We had in the NBA, I worked with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce when they were about 38. I mean, we talk about those guys like they were about to die. Right? In the NHL, we had Patrick Marleau. And in speaking to a lot of these guys, that their whole life they're almost institutionalized. They've been told what to wear, where to be, how to
Exactly.
behave. They've been given what to wear, and they've competed. They've had all the adulation and the media attention on them, and that goes away overnight.
Exactly.
Overnight, they have no purpose. They've lost their entire social circle, their entire community, and the rates of depression and just loss of purpose in that group I just
Exactly.
found to be spectacular.
Well, and even to the point to where people become suicidal.
Oh yeah,
Or they, I mean, there was a person I worked with who had won a number of gold medals, and it was in a sport that I don't follow very much. And I said, I don't know what gold medals. In the introduction, I said, I know that you did X, Y, and Z, but I don't know what medals you won. And frankly, I
yeah,
don't know what events. And it was like, that was unfathomable to that person.
yeah,
How could you not know that? And it's like, well, because that's not what is most important to me. What's most important to me is you.
right.
And that was the beginning of a shift. But it's still, you're right. It is like people have been institutionalized in different sports. When you no longer can perform at that high level
Hmm.
and your value drops, it's like, who am I?
Well, I think that actually starts fueling some of that pre-retirement because it's a sensitive subject. As an elite performer maybe starts declining in their performance, nobody really wants to talk about them coming to the end of that career.
Exactly.
And so we don't prepare them for that step.
Exactly.
Everybody walks around and talks about them like they're still 20 and at the peak of their powers. And when we don't give them an off ramp from that lifestyle that they've been in, and I'll comment on it from my own perspective even. I wasn't the one in the spotlight by any means, but I was there 24/7 with the athletes. It was an all-consuming career.
Hmm.
It was a very talk about insecure attachment. You were judged on your performance. It was a very competitive, performance-driven environment. And when I left sport, you really do feel adrift. Everything's been about the goal, the performance, the peaking with those athletes, and then you're
Then
out.
it's gone,
Yeah.
which is no different. So think about this, Jeremy, because if you could even imagine what you just described when someone gets to the end of their career and then poof, it's gone, that is no different energetically than what happened to me as an infant.
Hmm.
It
Right.
was like I was born, I 9 months I was inside my mother's womb. The only the one primary single relationship that I had.
Hmm.
My, I mean, nothing against fathers, but we don't carry babies around inside our bodies.
That's true.
We our role comes in a little bit later. Um, and it was like poof, this person that I'd been in 100% relationship disappeared.
Hmm.
That's the exact same kind of thing that you're talking about here.
Wow.
It's like poof, my whole world is gone. What do I do now? And there are some people who, are recognizable enough that people, even though they're not performing anymore, they still get recognized, but they're not winning gold medals, they're not winning pennants, they're not winning Super Bowls, they're not winning races, none of those things. Not being able to do what that person was able to do 10 years ago is a really
Yeah.
big deal.
Well, I found that moving from achieving everything that could be achieved in professional sport for my profession, coming into being an entrepreneur and spending basically the first 3 years being bad at everything.
Yeah.
I'm just not
Yeah.
accustomed to that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how do I
It's
do
been
this?
devastating. Like my self confidence plummeted in that first 12 months.
Exactly.
I,
And
I
when,
feel like just now, 3 years on, I'm just sort of starting to feel like myself again.
which is actually really interesting that you say that because that's about If we look from in utero, 9 months, plus about 18-ish months, 18 to 20, 24 months, that's pushing 3 years.
Yeah.
And also what's really interesting about this is, and I don't know, so far you've talked about male athletes. We as men develop slower than, as boys, we develop slower than girls. Like by the time a girl is 4, by the time we're 4 as a boy, we're developed about as far as a 3-year-old girl would be. There's also a bigger gap in adolescence. And boys/men catch up around 25, 26 years old. But we develop slower cognitively, we develop slower physically. And so there's a wider range in there early on where we can be damaged around the attachment stuff because we stay in that place trying to attach longer than girls do. It's like anything else. If you're, the longer you stay in something, if you're outside in the cold for 15 minutes, it's fine. But if you're outside in the cold for 15 hours, it gets pretty bad. So
I'm interested in that time duration piece, and you mentioned a little bit about fathers in there and their role being a little different, maybe a little later on. So again, if I use my example, my parents divorced probably when I was about 5. I imagine there was a breakdown in the relationship that was probably happening earlier that I was
probably
aware
at
of.
least 2 years earlier.
Yeah, and then they split, and my dad moved to the States when I was 9 years old. And he and I had a very, very close bond prior to that. So after that 18 months, what sort of happens to that as you progress through, and I guess as you start maturing, your nervous system continues developing?
Yeah. Well, one of the pieces that happens is because we are designed, attachment is a primal instinctual process. We are made to do this. However, anyone believes how we're made to do this. It's primal, it's instinctual, it's intuitive. And when attachment figures are there, that will continue. Attachment will continue literally throughout our lives. When that gets severed, like through a divorce, like moving overseas, those kinds of things, part of what happens is that there's a tendency to get stuck developmentally when that breach happens.
And what do you mean by get stuck developmentally?
So let me give a couple examples, and I'll tie them into a little bit what you spoke around that. The first 2 stages of life developmentally, and this is from my developmental model, so there are others out there too that have some validity to them. But that first stage of life from birth to about 18 months, I call is the world okay. So that's the question we're asking. Is the world an okay place to be? The next stage goes from 18 or 20 months up to close to about 4 years old. And that's where we learn to separate personhood and behavior. Well, and that personhood and behavior is, I'm an okay person, I'm a good person, and sometimes I do well, and sometimes I don't. And most of the time I do somewhere in between those things. Well, if your father left at 5-ish, when you were 5, most divorces when someone gets divorced, you can count on at least 2 years of turmoil before that. Because people don't just have an argument and say, see ya.
Right.
So you were right smack dab in the middle of that separation of personhood and behavior. So you just a few minutes ago talked about how that was so hard for you to navigate. So what happens is when we're under, no matter how old we are, if we have a rupture that has happened earlier, when we're under stress, when we feel loss, when we're in transition, we oftentimes go back to those earlier stages. No matter how old we are chronologically, we can be 35 chronologically and go back to that 2 to 3 year old place and behave that way. And where we can't separate person and behavior, where we might throw a fit, where we might throw a bit of a temper tantrum. And it's like, where did that come from? And people who know us go, hey, you don't usually act like that. What the heck's happening? So we go back to some of those earlier stages that are unfinished and under stress and under duress, basically.
So as we develop this, we've got that conditioning period, and we're starting to come into adolescence, adulthood. What might I notice about myself? Like, how would this be playing out as we continue to progress? What might I recognize in my body, in my behaviors, in my relationships?
Like if we're struggling with some attachment issues. So let's, like and you're talking like, say if we're in late, middle to late adolescence and early adulthood, we actually go back to one, food becomes, and nurturing becomes paramount. We don't trust that we're going to get that. We're seeking touch, which oftentimes, and contact, which oftentimes takes place through sex in those years. And we're teaching some kind of movement, or we're seeking some kind of movement. So we're still doing those same things. It's just that we're not doing those things in a really healthy way. Like there's a really healthy way to get touch, and there's a not so healthy way to get touch. There's a really healthy way to get movement, and there's not so healthy way. Like, for instance, with the movement, and you probably know this better than I do, how many people have you seen that are trying to achieve and they push themselves so hard that they injure themselves?
Oh, yeah.
Where probably if you were guiding them, you might say to me, do 3 100-yard sprints instead of 17 100-yard sprints. You're going to get just as much out of 3, but if I've got to go for it and I've got to prove myself and I've got to let you know that it's like, then I do 17 and then I come up lame there because my horse talked.
Yeah.
And then the next day it's like, well, what was going on, Dewey? Well, I had to prove myself instead of trusting you. If you're guiding me, trusting you and say, well, okay, I believe you. I can trust you, because that's what that early stuff is about, is learning to trust another human being and that they have your best interest at heart. It's that kind of stuff that plays out.
Right.
Or the other kind of thing that plays out, you see a lot of judgment. And when we're stuck in earlier stages, you see a lot of instead of having what I call an I-thou relationship, we're having I-it relationships. The difference is I-thou is in a relationship, it's that the other being has just as much validity as I do, and is just as powerful, is just as sentient as I am. An I-it relationship is where we objectify the other. So a lot of times we will objectify another person. That's where all the isms come from. But we also objectify ourselves. So it's that kind of stuff that you start seeing play out.
I think that relationship with self is a really critical one. And that objectification of yourself, if you're rewarded, which often, coaches will reward that behavior.
Yes.
If we look outside of sport, bosses will reward the overwork, the grind mentality, I'm going to sleep under my desk, all these really unhealthy, quite toxic behaviors that are, I think a lot of high performers have that period in their life where it's the never good enough model, where they've got to work harder and harder.
And that the underlying message is, I will be okay if
Right.
I put in 14 and a half hours instead of 13 or instead of 8. Or I will be okay if.
Yeah.
And
If I get all the work done, if I get this next promotion, if I get this thing, I'll be happy, I'll be okay, I'll be worthy, or whatever that might be.
when we're talking about fragmented attachment, and in a minute I can go into some of the nervous system stuff, but when we're talking about fragmented attachment, what the visual that I have is, those 1,000-piece puzzles that you put out on
Yeah.
your dining room table and you take 5 days to put together. It's sort of like if that puzzle is partially put together with all the different holes in it. That's sort of conceptually what I would see around fragmented attachment. And we try to do things to put in some puzzle piece of, if I know this person, or if I get enough likes on Instagram, or if I get enough praise, or if I can pick up, the most beautiful woman in the bar, or those kind of things. What I'm really looking for is what I call integrated or healthy attachment, or attaching, is because if we have that in ourselves and in our relationships, then the performance that we're trying to go after is purely about that.
Yeah.
Versus doing it to be good enough. And when I've seen and worked with people around their attachment stuff, and that gets solidified, then their performance excels. Because they get to, they actually get to focus on that.
Yeah. I see that a lot we talk about it with regards to getting to the top and staying at the top,
Yes.
them being two very different things. And I think that this seeking, this trying to prove yourself can get you there. But it's also what I think in high performers leads to a lot of the burnout and a lot of
Yes.
I look at, again, I'll use my career, but my subjective experience of myself and of my career is very different to what it looked like or what I would like to have experienced during my career. If you looked at me from the outside, I got a PhD. I worked for some of the biggest franchises in professional sport, in the NBA, in the NHL, Major League Soccer, won championships. I mean, that's a dream resume. I've got all the jerseys to put on the wall. I got the big gaudy ring to, put in a nice box. But my subjective experience of myself achieving that was almost separate. And it was exactly that empty puzzle piece where it was the achievement and I will be happy when. And it was like that was trying to push the wrong puzzle piece into the hole and couldn't celebrate the wins, couldn't
Right.
feel the achievement myself. I just sort of thought, well, it's just normal. It's just, I don't know, but it's not that.
Exactly.
It's not the next thing. And so,
That you cannot, when we have, and I want to talk about trauma here a little bit too. When we have that really solid integrated attachment, we can celebrate life and virtually everything we do in life. Instead of chasing achievement to make us okay in life, because life is already okay. And then we can go, oh yeah, we just won the Super Bowl. Let's celebrate that. Let's let that sink in. Let that integrate into our system. Or we can lose a Super Bowl and go, we were right up there at the top.
right.
And we're friggin' amazing. And we fought as hard as we could, and we can love each other as team members. And it's because it's a loss of a game, not the loss of stature as a human being.
Right. Right.
And and sort of the way I look at it is, I mean, there was a time in my life where, I was single and dating a bunch of different women, and And that was a fun gig. But it was like all of those relationships were an inch deep.
Mm-hmm.
But those relationships were an inch deep because I didn't know how to attach.
Right.
I had not worked through that. And and somebody will probably ask, how do you work through it? Well, the biggest way to work through attachment issues is grieving the loss of what we know we needed. Because inwardly,
Let's pause on that a second, Dewey. That's fascinating, and yes, that's where I wanted to go. Is how do we recognize and work through? Can you say that again about grieving what we didn't have?
yeah, let me give a little bit bigger perspective of that. So what I said was grieving the loss of what we know that we needed. I knew somewhere inside me I needed a mother that was there, and a mother that connected, that was the same mother that I had been inside her body.
Mm.
But as soon as I came outside of her body, I lost her. I knew instinctively and archetypally that I needed her. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we know as beings what an archetypal mother is. We know as beings what an archetypal father is, what an archetypal parent is. We know what we need. We know that instinctually. Not many people are perfect parents to meet that archetypal, but the closer they are to that, the less we have to grieve the loss of that mother or
Mm-hmm.
father. The further, so what's interesting to me with this is that when a child is born, everyone celebrates the child. It's like, here's this wonderful little boy, here's this wonderful little girl. When a child is born, a mother is also born.
Mm-hmm.
A father is also born. We're not a mother or we're not fathers until our babies are born.
Mm-hmm.
So let me do a bigger picture here. I worked for years in the area of developmental disabilities. So when a child was born that was, say, Down syndrome, we would go in and work with the parents, and two babies were born that day. One is a Down syndrome baby. The other one was a dream baby. The baby we thought we were going to have. To really accept this baby that perhaps has Down syndrome, we actually have to grieve the loss of the baby that we dreamed about having. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same thing, by the way, when we end a relationship. We have to grieve the loss of that relationship before we go into another one. So if we didn't get to do that as when we were born, we probably won't do that later on until we figure some stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that happens is that when we're born, we also know instinctively that a mother should be doing this and a father should be doing that. We literally bid for that. If parents are pretty close to that, then we end up pretty good. If parents are away from that, we literally have to grieve the loss of our archetypal mother to be able to accept our real mother.
Mm-hmm.
Our archetypal father to be able to accept our real father. Now, the vast majority of times are not so different than what I went through. Like, my mother is a really good person. I mean, she's no longer alive. She died a number of years ago, but she's a really good person. It wasn't that she did anything wrong. She just was alive, and she happened to get tuberculosis. Mm-hmm. So my grieving was the loss of a mother, the archetypal mother, not my real mother. But when I finally grieved that, it was like, oh, here's my real mom, who I can't even imagine what she went through being separated from her son at birth.
Right.
So
Because
she
that's an
went through.
interesting perspective, isn't it? She also lost that
She did, big
with
time.
you.
She did. And actually, there was a time when I was 34. She came to Colorado to visit me on my 34th birthday. And to her credit, she would talk about all this stuff as much as I needed to. And actually, as always gets to be. We were talking about this, and I'd done enough work to where it dawned on me to ask her what it was like for her. And I literally looked at her. I remember where I was sitting. It was in a little bay window where we could see the mountains. And I said, Mom, what was this like for you? And she just burst into tears and said, no one's ever asked me that. And that was sort of the day I grew up. And it was also the day that I started being able to have different kinds of relationships. And I had been approaching that. But it's that we all have to have that kind of a day somewhere in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Like it might be, and again, I'm only going by what you shared, but it might be, Mom, what was it like for you when you and Dad split? Well, Dad, what was it like for you? What was it like for you losing me?
Well, it's interesting. I very recently, within the last 12 months or so, I've had that conversation.
See, and isn't that amazing?
It's transformational.
Yeah.
And it does resonate because, my stepfather, who is the most wonderful man, he's my dad. So as you're explaining this, because there's a lot of conflict about that for me in grieving the loss of my father without disrespecting the love that I received from my stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there was that transitional period before he and my mum got together, that was where sort of this damage, quote unquote, was done. And it didn't take anything away from who he was as a father. But there's also sort of guilt of mourning what I didn't have in my biological father.
Exactly.
But the ability to have that connection now and allow, because that was the other thing, I had to allow that connection back with my biological father.
Exactly.
I kept him at arm's length through fear of losing him again. And so allowing that connection again and having that conversation with him about his perspective and sort of seeing that there were other humans involved in that.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, there are other humans involved in it.
It wasn't just me, apparently.
Exactly. And may I ask how old you are?
44.
Yeah. So you'd spent 44 years, one level or another, working with this.
Oh, yeah.
And when I'm saying that from a perspective of it, this stuff takes some time for us. This stuff takes some awareness for us. This stuff takes growing up enough to actually be adult enough to ask our parents what it was like losing us.
Yeah.
Or losing part of our relationship. And then, because I really want to honor what you're trying to do, both professionally and in this podcast, is when we have all of that baggage, and it's not bad stuff. I mean, it's not, my mother didn't try and do anything bad. My father was a World War II vet who had PTSD. He was sort of a mess. He wasn't trying to do anything bad, and growing up, and I mean, all of those kind of things. But it's like when we're carrying that stuff around, then when we go try to perform, whether it's performance on a basketball court, a tennis court, a football field, a track, a ski mountain, we're carrying all of that. And then what typically happens is that we take all of those unfinished business pieces with our parents and we project those onto our coaches, to our mentors, to our to being able to win, that kind of stuff. And when we get that stuff cleaned up within ourselves, then there's a purity to our effort to achieve.
Right.
There's a purity to our effort to have a quality relationship with what we're trying to achieve. Because when we're on a team, those are deep relationships. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and they're really important relationships, and they have depths to them.
Yeah.
And I've been on different teams where I can say, I mean, the people that are on those teams, or even teams of other therapists, when I've led some initiations with men, and there's a teaching team, it's like, yeah, they become my brothers, they become my
Yeah.
sisters, they become people who I really can count on. And if there's all the unfinished stuff that is getting in the way, then it 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 doesn't allow us to tap into that pure energy that we
Yeah.
need to really achieve in a really high manner.
I found that within my career, my therapist that I work with is Dr. Keith Witt, and similarly, he's at about 75 plus thousand contact hours with
Mm-hmm.
clients. And I think it was in recognizing this in myself. First of all, you have to be self-aware and identify that this is going on,
Yeah,
and then
absolutely.
working on, okay, this is impacting your relationships in this way, and being able to see that. I did see that, and many of our listeners won't be athletes. They'll be performers on Wall Street or elsewhere, where they're
Yeah,
still in a high performance environment. Cleaning up those dynamics, I think it is such an important part of being able to express yourself and your potential in
mm-hmm.
any level of performance. And I think that's where you can shift from never good enough, getting to the top, to really starting to thrive within your career at the top and really
Yeah,
starting to express
yeah,
yourself.
yeah. And exactly what you're talking about, as well as going, even though I'm not, and I'm thinking more of physical performance at this point, even though I'm not as physically able to do what I used to be able to do, I'm still at the top because I'm doing the very best I know how to do.
Hmm.
I mean, like I was out riding one of my horses today. I'm not riding the same way I did 15 years ago. I'm happy just to go mess around and play in creeks and up and down some mountains, and I don't need to compete. And one of the other things that's really interesting, I think, here is one of the ways that, and I'm sort of circling back around, one of the ways you that somebody can tell that they're in that quote performance place instead of being grounded and integrated is that they're different in different situations.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kimberly, who is my partner, and we've been together 11 years romantically, and we knew each other 6 or 7 years before that. And she worked at the same university I worked at. One of the things she said to me is, Dewey, you don't change. When you sit down and work as a therapist, have the same energy as you're talking to me, the same energy as when you're around horses, the same energy as when we're watching a TV show, the same energy as when you're giving a keynote speech, the same energy as when you're teaching. He said, you have one hat, so to speak. You're not
Yeah.
putting on a different hat. And when we go, okay, now I'm going to go talk to this high level performance leader, mentor, and coach, am I going to put on a different hat and talk to you, or am I going to be who I am? When I go out I'm not any different right now than I literally was talking to my horses the exact same way. He spooked at a couple things, and I was going, hey, buddy, you're okay. We can ride anything. And it's like when we put on different hats, it's like now I'm going to go be the tennis player, but over here I'm going to be this. Or now I'm going to be the mountaineer, but over here I'm going to be this. I mean, when we live our lives consistently and we have the same energy and the same level of contact in virtually every relationship we're in is when we know that well, let me say it differently, because the question was, how do we know when we're struggling? It's when we put on different hats. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm going to put on my therapy hat. Now I'm going to put on my cowboy hat. Now I'm going to put on my jujitsu hat. Now I'm going to put on my horsemanship hat. We're the same person no matter what.
Mm-hmm. And do we've talked a lot about the getting to this point. What are the actions that I have to take in order to get there? What are the practices? How can I heal and move towards that one identity?
Well, the first thing is, I would say virtually every high level performer, no matter what you're doing, needs to have a therapist of one sort or another.
Yeah.
We need to have some place to go that we can be seen, be accepted, be heard. We often talk about, I want to be seen, I want to be heard, I want to be gotten, I want to be cherished, and I want to be protected. Those are the 5 things I need in life to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's one piece. We also need to look at what unfinished business do we have around early loss, early traumas, early things like that. And not to dwell in those places and go, oh, this happened to me and poor me, but more to be in those places of going, what do I need to do to heal those things? No different. I mean, I've busted up my pelvis. I've busted up both knees. I've had 18 or 19 broken ribs. It's the same thing. We need a place to go to heal, and we need the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If I bust up my pelvis, I had a really bad horse accident and busted up my pelvis really bad. If the next day I went, but I got to go get on a horse again, I will do nothing but harm myself.
Mm-hmm.
So really taking the time to go back and go, okay, what really is underneath this? And not just from a rah-rah place, and not just from a place of let's set goals, but from a place of what do we need to grieve? What do we need to express? What do we need to rebuild? And what attachment issues do we need to go back and really take a deep look at?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think you said a couple of really important things there in terms of recognizing what might have gone on, revisiting your unfinished business, but not now using it as an identity or as a way to
right,
defend and hold your position. Oh, no, it's because I got this. It's because I got an anxious attachment. But you keep
exactly.
acting like that, right? You're just using it to justify. It's almost like virtue signaling doing the therapy, but I'm not actually going to
Exactly.
do anything about it, right? It's
Exactly.
the what do we do is the next important step.
Well, and the big piece, yes. Again, we're going back to separating personhood and behavior. Yeah,
Mm,
these things happen to me. They are not who I am. I am not my broken pelvis. I'm not my, abandoned baby. And it wasn't true abandonment, but
sure.
that's what it felt like from
Your
inside
nervous
me.
system didn't know that, right?
Yeah, my nervous system did not know that my mother had tuberculosis.
Mhm.
My little tiny brain didn't know that either.
Right.
I'm not those things. Those things are experiences that I've had. They're not who I am. And that's a little bit more nuanced way of separating the personhood behavior. But it's like, yeah, I've had experiences of harming myself, of major broken bones. I mean, when I busted up my pelvis, that was a flight for life deal. Last thing I
Right.
remember getting put on the helicopter was, we don't stop this bleeding, we're going to lose this guy.
Hmm.
It's like, that is an experience that I had. It's not who I am.
Yeah.
I've been in relationships where People have cheated on me. Those are experiences that I've had. They're not who I am. I've worked out really hard and trained really hard and won some races, and I've lost a whole bunch. But neither of those experiences are who I am. It's like they're experiences that I've had. That's one of the really big things. Because life is bigger than whether we win a game or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that Michelle and I have been really trying to work on is that self-awareness in the moment. It's fine when you're feeling good, being able to keep that separation.
Yep.
It's in the moments of crisis where you're having a moment where maybe you're turning anger inward and it's turning into depression and beating up on yourself, and just trying to work on that awareness in the moment of I'm having maybe it's a worthless moment, not I am worthless. Just subtly changing how we're relating to the experience, not owning it, but just being aware that we're in it.
Yeah. And let me come at this in a couple of different ways. Actually, 3 different ways. One is actually our friend Mark, who basically says if things don't go well, we have a story to tell.
Right.
So that's one way to look at it. It's like, oh, yeah, let me tell you this story, which is actually a way to separate personhood and behavior.
Yeah. That's interesting. Our dear friend Marcella, she's from London, and she just says it's all for the plot.
Exactly.
Right. So she'll use something similar.
So that's one piece. Another piece is that I actually talk a lot with people about is allow yourself to fully enjoy how miserable you feel.
Yeah.
Like I'm really pissed off at this. I'm really upset about that. This happened and that happened. And because one of the biggest reasons and biggest things that keeps us from getting through those things is judging ourselves for being miserable about something. Mm-hmm. Like, I shouldn't be miserable. I'm a piece of shit if I'm miserable, or I'm not together enough, it's like, no, go enjoy it. If you lost a race, go curl up on the couch and let yourself be miserable for a while. Instead of trying to make yourself be different, because some people have called that radical acceptance. The terms I use is integrated acceptance. Mm-hmm. It's like me being miserable right now, or being upset, or being angry, or feeling lost is an integral part of who I am as a human being. It's just how I am. The most damaging thing we can do is judge ourselves for being upset, or judge ourselves for having snipped at our partner, or judge ourselves for whatever. The other piece that's really interesting here, how much do you know about polyvagal theory?
Can you explain that for the listeners who maybe they don't know what polyvagal theory is?
Right. So let me be super simple with this, because it's actually, I think, a brilliant concept. And we have sort of 3 parts. We have parasympathetic, which is sort of rest and digest. It's sort of mostly the state that we're in right now. We have what's called sympathetic, which is, most people call it fight or flight, but really what it truly means is mobilization. So it's much more than fight or flight. These are the big categories. And then we have what Porges calls the red zone, which is, it's like a step beyond sympathetic, which is freeze, faint, sleep, or dissociate. So when we are, and I'll get a little bit nerdy here, is that our ventral vagal parasympathetic is basically our nervous system above our diaphragm, which is our heart, our lungs, our facial expressions, our breath, even our eyes. And ventral vagal is is essentially social engagement. The total flip side of that, which is also part of parasympathetic, is called the dorsal vagal, and that's the red zone, and that's basically our nervous system below our diaphragm. And it also connects into our cerebellum, which is our very primal ancient brain. And that's the pure, I'm not going to make it, I'm depressed, I don't know what I'm going to do, and giving up. So that's a collapse state. But both of those parts are part of our parasympathetic. Our sympathetic, which is more connected to our spinal, all the nerves in our spine and the nervous system coming out of our spine and our brainstem, is demobilization and fight or flight. So we can be in any of those three states. Depending on the state that we're in, our story comes out of that. If we're in that dorsal vagal parasympathetic, which is the red zone, it's like the world sucks and I'm a victim, or I don't know what to do, or I'm stuck. The sympathetic is, if it's pure sympathetic, it is fight or flight. But what we're really going after is sort of 1 foot in sympathetic and 1 foot in parasympathetic, so to speak, because we want that ventral vagal social engagement system as well as the mobilization system. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, but when you ask a question about our awareness, it's actually, there are different exercises that we can do to become aware of what state we're in.
Right.
Are we in rest, relax, hang out? Are we in sympathetic and parasympathetic together, which is a mobilization? Like, if you watch, like one of the people that I've gone back and like just watched as much video as I can is Muhammad Ali.
Mm-hmm.
When you would see Muhammad Ali in the middle of unbelievable fights, he never lost it. He never went in. It was like he was so grounded. That's part of what made him so darn good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And actually, you look at Michael Jordan, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's always ground in there.
And again, to look outside of sport, that's what characterizes the world's best traders. It's a lack of emotionality. It's a lack of losing it in that high pressure moment where people can hold the course.
Yes. And so here's what I go after. This is what I try to do. Because the same thing can happen with horses. The horse I was riding today, his name is Moondash. His great-great-grandfather was Dash for Cash, which is, he has the fastest horse in the world in a sprint, 57 miles an hour. So Moondash is fast. So a little deer was in the bushes today, and he jumped out, and so Moondash decided he had to jump sideways about 10 or 12 feet. But my job is to not change. Mm-hmm. My job is to go, okay, so you jump sideways 10 feet. So, because my energy will affect his energy.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to do is, and I've worked a lot on this, and it's the same. I know that, that the high-level traders, the high-level negotiators, the Michael Jordans, the Muhammad Alis, the Peyton Mannings, those people in the world, they don't change inside.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I work with people a lot around inside energy and outside energy.
Yeah. And
if my inside energy can be soft and grounded, then sometimes my outside energy needs to come up and get big. I can get to a 7 or 8 on my outside energy, and my inside energy doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And that's what my goal is on a nervous system level is like if I'm working with horses, like if I'm doing training or working with horse, it's like bucking and kicking and et cetera, and I'm going, okay, let me know when you're done. That's different than going, this horse shouldn't be doing this, and this horse, that whole piece. And it's like, when you're finished, I'm here.
That horse is only going to make it worse.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only going to make me worse. And what I find is when I find myself losing that ground inside, because I can get big on the outside. I mean, I can like get really tough and I can say, no, this is not what we're doing under certain circumstances. Or actually, if you're going to buck and kick, you have to keep bucking and kicking for a while. Keep going until you get this out of your system. But if I'm doing that from a place of anger or a place of being punitive or those kind of things, then I need to get out of it. I need to go take a break. Same way in my relationship with Kimberly. If we have a conflict around something, soft inside, and then my energy on the outside modulates for whatever it needs to be, then we get through any conflict pretty darn easy. And it's a few minutes.
What might be the exercise then to allow you to, first of all, recognize your state and then to modulate and regulate into that soft inside and gauge your outside energy?
Well, the first piece that I do is I teach people the states that I just spoke about, and I do that in more depth than we even did here. I just have people throughout the day keep a notebook, and I ask people to do it for a week of every time that you're in social engagement and you're chill, and write it down. 5:03, talking to my partner, feel great. Then you hear screeching of car brakes out your window, and it's like, and you're up in mobilization. 5:10, car brakes, da da da. And I have people begin tracking that. They're literally beginning to track what state that they're in. Have you gone into a shutdown? And most of the time people they don't shut down all the way. They'll actually, one of the things people will go, I actually don't remember the last 12 seconds. I don't know what I did. I was working with a person who is a high-level tennis player, and when they would miss a shot, it would be like they go, I don't remember what I did. There's like a split second of dissociation in there. And so the big piece is I just call it a state diary. What state are you in? And keeping track. The second step is don't try and change anything. Just allow yourself to accept those states. And that's, again, we're going all the way back to personhood and behavior. And is the world okay place to be? It's like, yeah, you can be quite upset right now, and the world's fine. You're fine. And so those are the first two steps. And then after people begin getting that, and even in therapy or mentoring, depending on which I'm doing, you can see people change. You can see their energy changing. And I'll just say, what state are you in right now? And it's like, oh, I just went to here, and now I want to get out of this. Or I want to stay in this a little bit and see what happens. The biggest way, there's actually two ways to get out of pure sympathetic or where we want to fight or we want to flee. One is breath. That's actually the biggest piece. But part of what happens a lot with the nervous system stuff is that there's so much out there around let's downregulate. But the other piece that we need to learn how to do is to upregulate. One of the things I do with horses is this is 1,000 to 1,200 pound being that's incredibly fast. It's incredibly athletic. That's 1,000 times stronger than I am. If I'm trying to downregulate that horse, that's not going to get me anywhere. That's all that's going to do is shut them down.
Right.
And then the next time something comes up, you probably know this term, it's called trigger stacking. It's like there's one that we shut down, then two, and then three, and then we get up to 7 or 8, and then there's an explosion. And it's like, let's move that energy. Let's run and buck and kick and roll and fart and do whatever else you need to do. And we need to be able to do that with ourselves. It's like, how can you move? How can you express yourself? How can you stomp your feet and breathe at the same time? Down in my garage, I have a heavy bag. And just really like boxing gloves. Do I need to go down and punch that bag for 15 or 20 minutes? energy has to move, and that's that
Yeah.
movement piece.
Yeah.
So we can either move energy down through our body and into the ground, or we can move energy up and out. There's too much out there, I think, in the world of working with people where it's like all down regulating, and we need to do some safe up regulating. And that's the key word, is how can I upregulate and make some noise and push against something or that's actually safe and nobody gets hurt.
Yeah.
And that usually takes all of about 8 to 10 minutes for people to get through. That's one of the things people, when I work with people, they go, well, it'll take me forever to get through this. And I'll say, okay, still try it. And about 7 or 8 minutes later, they're exhausted.
Yeah.
They're going, oh, I feel so much better. And it's like, oh, okay, that took 8 minutes.
Yeah. I've seen that in my work, coaching people, through training in the gym and
Yeah.
with a lot of people who are sort of coming in with a trauma history, it almost ends up being this sort of movement therapy where they can talk about this quite triggering stuff, but then they have an outlet. They're moving, they're doing something, they're moving heavy weight, they're expressing that.
Yes.
So it feels like as we're moving and talking about stuff, you do feel the energy come out of it. Michelle and I, we have a rebounder in the living room that you can just go and jump on, and we go out for a run, we go work out, spin classes, all these things that are just really big outputs of energy. It's amazing how different you feel after that. So I'm really grateful that you brought that up.
Yeah, exactly. And whether it's rebounding or whether it's running or whether we have an archery range set up out here too, where it's like, okay, I'll go put a few balloons up. And it just feeling that energy of pulling a bow back and feeling that kind of energy and letting that move. But the first thing we have to do is be aware. So part of if somebody is going really high, like in the sympathetic, where it's really the fight or flight, there are many times where I'll start and I'll go, let's go one notch higher and see if that'll relieve. If that doesn't, then I'll work on down regulating. If someone is way down in that dorsal vagal parasympathetic, even if somebody comes in, and I will not sit, like we do all of our therapy here. We have a little cabin we built up on the upper part of our land. I'm not going to sit there and if someone's depressed and they're judging themselves, and it's like, I'm not going to sit there and try and talk them out of it. It's like, let's go. We get up and we start moving. A lot of times I'll go over to the horses. You've been around horses, right? At least some. Let's get the manure and we have contests to see how far you can throw the manure and how accurate you can be. After a few throws, it's like, oh, this is good to throw some shit around. Well, so what else? What other shit do you need to throw around? Let's do that. So we're working with regulation. We need to know when to upregulate. We need to know when to downregulate. The other piece that's incredibly important is whether you're working with someone or I'm working with someone, while we're helping someone regulate, we need to stay in contact with that person. We need to have, and many times I'll just wrap people up like in my energy, and they'll go, what'd you just do? I feel a lot better. And I go, well, I just wrapped you up in my energy. And even today with my horse that he spooked a little bit, and I just like wrapped him up in my energy, and he went, and
right.
When horses, they'll snort and I'll go, and it's like, okay, now we're good. And that took all of about 4.5 seconds.
Right.
And so we need to purposely upregulate or purposely downregulate in contact and relationship with another being. And that's one of the other things. I'll just throw this in when we're back. One of the pieces, like early on, where if we've been harmed in relationship or have had some fragmented attachment, the only way to really get through that is in relationship with another person. And it doesn't always have to be a therapist. It can be a really good coach. It can be a really good mentor. It can be a group of people that you can really be transparent and vulnerable with.
Hmm.
And a lot of times that's where it starts. So,
Yeah, I've personally benefited from all of those. We have a men's group that I went and did a big retreat and trek out in Peru with, and we still meet every month. So that's one forum that's a really beautiful group forum.
mm-hmm.
I've had a therapist for 15 plus years in Keith, in that very sort of intimate one-on-one style relationship, and
Yeah.
I have various mentors,
Yeah.
for some more specific guidance. If it's around work, if it's around something that I'm really stuck on. So I think all of those don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think they're all tools that you can use for different things, and I have benefited immensely from all of them.
100%. And even me, I mean, I have people that I do all of those things with. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are people that I can call at 2 a.m. and go, this happened or that happened, or I need some input, or I need someone to go sit with me or whatever. So yeah, we need that. I think really the biggest piece is, regardless of the performance that we're trying to do, even in that performance, we need somebody that can guide us, that can give us new places to go, that can give us new ways to look at things. And I mean, even in the horsemanship world, there's a guy named Tick Maynard who, for the last 2 years, has won this competition called the Road to the Horse. And he's a friend of mine. And it's like, and he has all kinds of videos out. And it's like, I'm going, okay, what do I do here? And I mean, I've been around horses all my life. So it's like, but always wanting somebody to be able to have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
And the relationship is always more important than the outcome.
Yeah. Dewey, I've kept you about an hour longer than I promised you. So
Well,
it seems like
that
a great place to wrap. But I'd love for people to just have three of the key takeaways that you think that people can start with to get them on this journey. What would you like people to take away from this conversation?
one is to really work around separating personhood and behavior.
Mm.
Like, who are you as a being on the face of the earth, and not what did you do? And a lot of the ways I will frame that for somebody is going, laying on your deathbed, will having won that race be the thing that you remember? Or will it be the person that you really connected with and fell in love with, for instance? So that piece. The other piece is to know that when we've been injured in relationship, that the way out is in relationship. We cannot heal those injuries by ourselves. And even if that injury is, you lost a race or you injured yourself in a sporting event or something, we need relationship. And I think probably the most important, I don't know if it's the most important, is to, and I haven't talked about this so far, but let me talk about breath and expression. To stay alive, we have to breathe. We don't have a choice. And we can hold our breath long enough, if some people can. I don't know if I would even want to try this. Hold our breath long enough to faint.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as we faint, what's going to happen? We're going to start breathing again. So we don't have a choice around whether we breathe. We only have a choice about how we breathe. And learn about breath and breathing. And there are a number of books out there to do that. And I'm guessing that in your work, you do a lot with breath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That same thing is true with emotional expression. We will express. We are designed and made to express. We do not have a choice about whether we express. We only have a choice about how we do that. If we choose to try to not express, that will be harmful to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's what gives us ulcers. That's what gives us heart attacks. That's what gives us high blood pressure. That's what gives us all of those things, or at least part of what gives us that. Work on conscious breathing and work on conscious expression. of whatever emotionally is happening for you inside, and do that in relationship with another.
Well, Dewey, those are just beautiful takeaways and really resonated with everything that I'm personally working on right now, Michelle and I together. So thank you for those. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time, taking this evening to chat with us. It's just been beautiful.
I have so enjoyed this, and my wish and hope for an outcome of this is to get to know you personally better, and that hopefully this is the beginning of a friendship. So I'd really like that.
Yeah, no question. Me too. And Dewey, where can people find this prolific Instagram account that you have?
Everything's under Duey Freeman.
Okay.
My Instagram is, my Facebook is. Kimberly and I together teach other therapists and coaches how to work with people and horses. You can find that under the Gestalt Institute of the Rockies. And then all the rest of the programs we run, which is teaching a lot of the stuff that I've talked about, is under deweyfreeman.org. Or Kimberly runs the Colorado Ecotherapy Institute. And we support each other in those two things. So I support her in that, and she supports me in this.
Beautiful. Well, we'll make sure all of that gets included in the show notes. And I think just people are going to get so much from this. So thanks again, Dewey.
Thank you so very much. This has been so fun. Thank you so much.
What an incredible and rich conversation with Duey Freeman on the emotional and neurological patterns that drive high performance and how they can just as easily drive burnout. Here are the 3 key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, separate personhood from behavior and results. Anchor your worth in who you are, not the outcomes you produce or how others react. When you remember that your value is not tied to performance, you create the freedom to grow, take risks, and recover without shame. Number 2, heal relational injuries in relationship with others. Seek a therapist, mentor, coach, or a trusted group, because we do not do this repair work alone. Healing happens in safe, supportive connections, and giving yourself permission to be witnessed and cared for is a powerful step towards wholeness. Number 3, learn and use breath work and healthy emotional expression. Be conscious of how you breathe and pair it with safe expression of emotion to regulate your state under stress. Your breath and your voice can become tools that bring calm, restore balance, and remind you that you have agency even in the hardest moments. At Vitality Collective, this is exactly the kind of work we do, supporting high performers to build strength, resilience, and long-term vitality through world-class diagnostics, personalized planning, and ongoing coaching. If you'd like to learn more, visit www.vitality-collective.com. If this episode spoke to you, I'd be grateful if you'd follow the show, leave a rating or review, and share it with someone that you think would benefit. You can also stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vitality Collective Performance. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.